Hello and welcome to day 77 of 365 days towards racial change. My name is Tomlins Nyback, and we're here talking about Black issues in America, contemporary, but we'll also take a telescopic look way into the past, especially around slavery, its roots and beginnings, and see how that institution impacts Black Americans today. We'll also look at white life, white issues as they relate to power and privilege. Two ideas are emerging as I continue this project. First idea has two parts. First part is, does the Black mind, the Black slave mind, still perpetuate? Is it still alive in America today as far as vulnerability, a need to belong, knowing it is marginalized, that there are institutions, people, groups in place that bar unfettered advancement in a land of overflowing with wealth and resources. Second part of that is, does the white mind of privilege, expectation of favor, entitlement prevail? Is that being passed down generation to generation? Is it done intuitively, genetically, institutionally? Is it is it an unexplainable is in America, an ism, maybe an unnamed ism in America, prevailing in white minds and Black minds alike, and all the other races and colors in between? The second part is, I have a burden that Black Americans have a financial language, begin incorporating proper financial discourse. This proper financial understanding and language is one of the ways, avenues of accessing some of these wealth and resources, some of the ways to overcome the marginalization that is apparent here in America towards Black folks. So so it's a year-long deal here. We're I guess you could say more than a fifth of a way through that, and let's get going, continuing with our introduction. I'm inspired by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson, and he articulates these ideas so powerfully and so profoundly. I was just lit a fire in my own heart, my personal life, to do this project. I read three of his works, which we reference quite heavily here. Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. I want you to get these books because we do reference them, and then so you know I'm not making these things up. He's a credible individual in that he's helped presidents get elected. He's been very influential on numerous educational boards, and he's a good man to see. I don't know him personally. I just have watched a ton of his videos. He still tours the country speaking on these issues. Second book I read was Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice, and his national plan to empower Black America. Powernomics has some good ideas. That his works are more than a decade old, but the ideas are timeless, and we need not worry about time so much. It would be enough if before I left this world and shook off my mortal coil that I knew that the majority of Black folks' minds had begun to awaken to these very real issues, and that would be a great start to good, solid national movement, overturning of some institutions and processes in America that keep Blacks in such a vulnerable position. We take a fictional look occasionally at the life of slaves and whatnot. We'll be talking more in depth about that actually today on some issues. Uncle Tom's Cabin. How you Beecher Stowe's phenomenal work of mid 1800s slave life, white master's life, and it's a good book to just we wade through every couple weeks. We'll take a chapter, chew on it for a little while, and get an idea fictionally about that work. Now, while it's a fictional work, I believe it explains a lot of very real problems, real dynamics that are the roots of some of the causes and conditions of blacks in America. Behind me, hashtag us too, hashtag USTOO. You find black women discoursing there, uh, having their community, getting their needs met. Also, Black Enough, BLAGGENUF dot whatever that is. Kind of like a black Facebook for black folks. I'm sure there are many others. It's the information age. Plenty of internet sources. Do your own research and fact checking, of course. If you got a business mind, you can check out the Black Business School. Check out Dr. Boyce Watkins over there and his crew. They got a lot of great products. As you may guess, I'm not a big business tycoon or anything like that. As a result of the school or teaching, I don't like subscriptions or financial entanglements uh, too much. That's a whole other long discussion. But he gave me a trial. I took a taste that just didn't figure it out at this time. Oh, excuse me. All righty then. So today we're actually coming out of a Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. And we're looking at question number 96. Why did grave robbers choose black corpses? This is in his section on science and medical experiments. And, a lot of some of this information is very new to me, and I was actually shocked by just some of the stuff I found on the internet, which I believe is true and credible. Because some of these stories I read, I've heard over time, and with black folks, we were already at a level in the white mind as barely above creatures that walked on all fours on the earth. I mean, that's how far down white institutions put black people. But we were bipedal animals that could articulate and manipulate. We had an opposing thumb. You know what I mean? All of the nomenclature to bear the sun with our black skin. We were stronger and more endurable. I mean, you could hang it up to get such a challenged, lazy group of people en masse to do the kind of work that black folks did. Here in building America, all that free labor that they got out of black folks. So, if you can think about horrid, painful animal testing, animal cruelty, there you have it. It's easily found in American slavery. And even internationally, we'll talk about some things. Blacks we were just less than, lower than, we were creatures on the earth, and we were compelled to participate. We were forced confined, and to suffer all manner of cruelty at the hands of this group of white people with absolute power. They say power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely, is the saying I've heard. Um, so it's amazing. I'm grateful to whatever white allies we had to uh, connect us with getting taken seriously and helping us get emancipated to some degree. Those are just the beginnings. We need to come together and make some other things happen. But for the most part, we have we still have a long way to go. But there are some things here, and actually, there's some modern things that I'm finding that medical community uh, has this attitude towards blackness, and they're still using us. They're still encroaching on us. They do it at the voting booths, in the doctor's office. It just seems that we always have to be so relentless in uh, being circumspect of the services we're getting and the treatment we're having. It's it's appalling how much groping and how much fending off we have to do, whether it's police shootings, law enforcement. There's always this encroachment. There's always, what has encouraged me to do this work is because I felt this pressures. Everyone wants to put a hook in me and enslave me and take my time and my resources and my mind and my money and my dignity. It's hooks. You ever see the first Hellraiser movie? I think this is a motif in a lot of the other movies, but the idea is they're messing with this magic box, right? And they're messing with the magic box, and the box will shoot out a hook, and you get some pleasure and pain from the hook, and you're now addicted, and you're hooked to the box, and you keep messing with it, and you open in dimensions and demons and angels and pleasure, pain. That's how I feel in America. I feel such limited in what is mine, what is really mine in America. And this is the earth, yet people come and they fence off areas, they patent procedures and products, and everything is theirs. You know, I, I'm preparing to get back into more serious writing, and some themes are happening here that I must, just for my own mental health, must get down on paper. So let's get to, well, not even on paper, the cloud. That's somebody else's too. Here we go. Why did grave robbers choose black corpses? And so we're talking about medical experimentation and things like that. Painful, icky stuff. But first, even before I read, that's the question, the topic of today, but I went to the internet, just flipped through, found 5 cases, and let's talk about them briefly. First is the famous Tuskegee syphilis experiment case, and this was a case they subjected these black men to syphilis without their knowledge or permission, and it was a study over 40 years, 1932 to 1972, where they're doing this experimentation on these men, and what makes it so profoundly sadistic is that when proper treatments for syphilis came about, they didn't even tell the guys they had treatments. They just wanted to see the history of the disease and its progression. And that's the hypocrisy of the white folks, is that, they want to they treated black folks as animals, as less than dogs and cats, yet the results and findings were perfectly adequate across the whole human spectrum. You know what I mean? So such hypocrites, especially here in the medical community. So I read also, and I put a link in the brief notes on this subject, this webpage that I accessed. I don't even remember what it was. Uh, in modern days, the CDC was knowingly, I don't know if there was the CDC or some organization, knowingly giving measles vaccine to black babies, black children before the age of 3, contributing to autism, like mentally jamming up a child. And this vaccine thing is still under debate on whether or not to do it or get it. You know, um, I was fortunate. I came out unscathed from it. But I hear rumors that there's just so many drugs and vaccines they're giving to these young, undeveloped bodies, and we're just moving way too fast. That's pharmaceutical, big money, pushing agenda, lobbying, and things like that. So we get that, but this appears that there was a focused, um, you know, event to hobble black children mentally. We got enough issues with. We already got crime and drug abuse as options for the black folks as they grow up in depressed communities, broken homes, and whatnot, violence. But we have the medical community that's betraying us. In the name of going to public school and laws and things like that, and being able to move socially in groups. Female slaves. This is what really shocked me. I almost did not do today's piece on this one portion that I stumbled upon. Female slaves back, uh, back then. This guy, Dr. J. Marion Sims, experimented on them for a condition, vesicovaginal fistula. It sounds something fibroid in the vagina, and it's a very painful condition for women. And this guy would do surgeries on these slave women with no anesthesia. And he's quoted in lectures saying, he gave no anesthesia because he didn't feel that the pain was great enough to justify um, applying some pain relief to these slave women. Wow, you know that had not that could not have been a pretty surgery. I've seen pictures of like vaginal circumcision and things like that. Same idea. What is wrong with people and humans? But think about animal testing, the utter cruelty there. Henrietta Lacks, I've heard of this. This is pretty famous. She was one of the first people to have that they discovered immortal cells. When you think about immortal cells, and they took these from her from she had cancer, and they took the cancer cells and the actually healthy cells, but her cells lived longer than other cells, apart from um, constant replenishing, and that's quite a fascinating anomaly. And so they've been cloning her cells for years. They say, you know, from those cells that they took from her, they've cloned upwards of 20 tons of her cells. Now, problem is, well, they took him from her without her knowledge or permission, so that's a common thing when it comes to black folks, it's without knowledge or permission, unless you're awake and they're tearing at your sexual organs with knives and stuff. But with all this, these billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies have not reimbursed her name, not built a trust for her, not reimbursed her family members, descendants. You know, that's free labor turning in to the Incredible Hulk taking massive amounts of steroids. Wow, what a payday. And they shamelessly go on experimenting using these cells, developing medicines and stuff. Sarah Bartman, she had a condition called Hottentot Venus. She had very large buttocks. And through this, she was forced to be on display, her and another female, forced to be on display and toured around Europe because she had a big buttocks. And you know, it's sad, you know, when it comes to black folks, you know, the white entitlement and privilege is like, that's going to benefit us financially, take it. And that's what they do. And so this woman in this Hottentot Venus condition, you know, is just drafted. She had no say in performing or not. It was just white folks wanted it. That's what they got. So now we get to some of Dr. Anderson's commentary on the black corpses. It's just to illustrate this experimentation on black folks. You know, it goes on today. You know, I got to watch myself. I've been under general anesthesia a couple times, and I've not had a good experience with it. You know, I don't like that because you're out and they just do what they want. I've got this scar under my chin, or I told the doctor, you know, I understand the procedure is going to be done inside the mouth. And he's like, yeah, you know, he's not even the one doing the surgery. Do you understand your doctor and the surgeon are two different people? You know, you may drop your car off at the mechanic, but he's just kind of the manager of the shop. You know, he knows parts and stuff. He can change oil, but he's probably got a real high-class professional in the back that really does the work. And that whatever conversation you're having with Mr. Manager Mechanic ain't going to care when it goes whatever the professional man or woman in the back is going to do to your car. That's the same way the medical profession does. Now, Dr. Anderson, you know, he talks about, in this case, cadavers, black corpses, and whatnot. And, you know, he found that white students kind of back in the day wouldn't do autopsies on black folks, and they would insist on having black folks to cut up to do these autopsies and experiments because they're preparing for the medical profession. So these cadavers were very valuable and important, and even it became such an industry that by 1878, that was kind of the heyday of grave robbing and finding these black corpses, and because it was very profitable, very lucrative business, and The graves are the sites of slaves or poor folks, but white folks got robbed too. It's money, but mostly blacks, because they knew white entitlement, white privilege, knew white power, knew that there'd be no backlash from black families. They have a ceremony. Black families have their ceremony, funeral, put their loved one to rest, and maybe a night or two goes by. There's white folks tearing at the grave to dig up the body. Also on that note is that black men who are ill are deemed having incurable diseases were resold back on the market, probably specifically as medical merchandise, and euthanized, hopefully, and taken and had experiments done. I say hopefully, think like I have the respiratory thing that can become very chronic and troublesome at different points of the year, and I can imagine not being able to rid myself of this cough and being sold, and God forbid that I wouldn't be fortunate enough to be euthanized. They don't want to jam stuff and look while I'm still alive. Very real possibility. I smile and joke, but these black folks who were already sick, compromised, and then compelled to participate in painful, degrading, heartless, ruinous experiments. Very sad. Very sad. So the white entitlement and privilege that didn't expect a whole lot of resistance or pushback from black folks when they went and robbed graves and whatnot. It's that conditioning for black folks to be just so passive, stand on the sidelines while their now dead brothers and sisters are being raped and abused, manipulated all over again, even apparently in the afterlife by these Christians. It says using black men, black bodies were required to produce great men of science. This is a quote. He talks about here from a novel, a fictional account. Just blacks were impotent. There was an exploitation of black impotency. And then finally he wraps up with some discussion about blacks in New Orleans, Louisiana prisoners being subjected to psychosurgical experiments, exposing the brain and cauterizing nerve centers and stimulating and manipulating brain areas. And it's that paradox of human life that the apparatus that communicates pain to us and everything does not feel pain itself. You can remove bone, the skull here, expose the brain, and you could do stuff up there. I wouldn't even know it. I would just feel certain ways, or my body would shut down, or you could manipulate my arms, but I wouldn't feel the connection that you're making up there. And that's what these experiments with electrodes in the brains of these prisoners in New Orleans. We were just fodder for the system. So much over and over. That's my consistent complaint is that the white privilege and power wants us to be non-threatening when they are the ones who perform the most violence against us by far, statistically by far. We've been raped, now medically tortured and manipulated, robbed, imprisoned, marginalized. And I'm impressed that they just do it and get away with it. My education, my knowledge at least helps put some resistance, appropriate resistance there, so that I'm just not totally helpless in this whole thing. So that's day 77. We're pretty icky, painful discussion, very real pieces of information in there performed by white folks on black folks. I'm pounding this 9 back. That's 365 days towards racial change. Let's check it out tomorrow.